Good evening. Welcome to the Steel City Huddle podcast. I'm Leanne Lohman, and I will be joined shortly by my co-host, Zach Franciscus, who's handling just a couple of things right now, but he will be here soon. So in the meantime, while we wait for Zach, we can talk about a few of the kind of news items that have been going on in Steeler land. It's actually been a surprisingly busy little week in the middle of the off season. We've got the announcement today of all of the international games that are coming this week. And for the first time ever, there's going to be 7 international games played this season. And for the first time ever, the Minnesota Vikings, who've played more international games than anybody else and who've never lost an international game. I didn't realize that. I always think of our one horrible game against them in London, but we will be facing them again on week 4 at the end of September in Ireland for the first game ever in Ireland. So that's exciting. It'll be curious to hear, when some of the players talk this season, like Cam Hayward, what they think about that. The Steelers also got rookie mini camp underway today and dropped a picture of their rookie draft class on Twitter or X to let everybody know the group was all there, which was good to see. And it's always fun to watch some of those other little side stories that go along, like the teammates from Ohio State that are there reunited, Will Howard and Jack Sawyer, who both on that national championship team in Ohio. So it's fun to see them. There was also news that came out today. I saw it for the first time that Santonio Holmes was named the new wide receivers coach at Central State University. So that's exciting for him. He's most famous for that amazing catch he made in the Super Bowl. So hopefully he can give some of those skills to the kids he's working with. Now to kind of move on to some a little bit of tea, the gossip out in Steeler land, and talk about some of that. There was word this week dropped by Andrew Filipponi. I'm sure you'll all be shocked to hear that rumor was refuted. Filipponi said that Aaron Rodgers has allegedly joined the country club, Neville Wood Country Club, but apparently the president told Rick Walsh from KDKA that was categorically untrue, that Rodgers hadn't joined the country club at all. And if he does sign with the Steelers, it's true that it's a beautiful country club, but that signing or that joining hasn't happened yet. So if you bought into that, I don't know, then that's kind of on you for believing anything Andrew Filipponi puts out there. But Rich Walsh came back, spoke to the president of the country club, and refuted that. I also thought it was interesting today that Adam Schefter talked about Pittsburgh while he was on the Pat McAfee show and said that he feels like what Pittsburgh has been doing. He was asked kind of what was the quote, sneaky aside to getting rid of George Pickens. What was this piece of it that was kind of sneaky that other people might not be thinking of? And to Schefter, he felt that is really the fact that the Steelers are amassing all of these draft picks to be prepared for 2026, when, of course, they are going to be hosting the draft there in Pittsburgh at Acrisure Stadium and right downtown. That should be an exciting event. I saw people on X already looking and booking their hotel rooms, figuring out what relatives they can stay with, whose couch they can crash on. So if someone's got a couch for me, let me know. I'll be there with my duffel bag in tow and ready to go to the draft. They're talking about this draft being one of the largest in history, and as far as the number of people that it attracts there, over 1 million, which could be one of the largest drafts in history. And Schefter believes that the Steelers, who currently have 12 picks already for the 2026 draft, are working to pull together this large group of draft picks to be the first team to ever be a host city and draft a top quarterback in the draft in that same year. So he kind of mentioned how when you think about Green Bay and their draft this year that they hosted and how big it was and how excited the fan was, how they all went crazy when they drafted Matthew Golden with their first pick, and that's a wide receiver. So not to disparage Golden, but obviously the quarterback pick is a little bit more exciting, and he feels like this is something that they could really be looking towards the future. So I think that was interesting. There was also news that came out today, and we're going to talk about George Pickens a little bit more when Zach does get here. But there was also some news that kind of leaked out of Steelers camp that maybe the players were not so happy with George Pickens, and they were kind of hoping that he would move along. They in a Omar Khan and Mike Tomlin have done press conferences in this past week. Mike Tomlin really wanted to focus on like the rookies at camp and focus more heavily on that, talking about like Will Howard's development and, getting these guys, in and used to the system and what it looks like when a player is, already showing that they have the early signs of success. While Omar Khan who doesn't usually talk at this time of the year, seemed to do his press conference solely for the fact of answering questions about the Pickens trade, which was typical Steelers, Omar Khan, Mike Tomlin, Art Rooney, which is to say not a whole lot of information given about that. He kind of said that they'd had some calls, what we'd already heard before. They had some calls during the draft, that none of those calls really made sense to them, none of the offers that were made. And, when they talked to Dallas, that this offer from Dallas really made sense for the team, and they decided to go with it. They felt like it was, he said multiple times, was in the best interest of Pickens and in the best interest of the organization. So that kind of led me back to where I was when Zach and I talked about this. We did our brief, like 20-minute George Pickens segment the day that the trade happened, that it makes me feel like Pickens wasn't showing them what they needed to see, saying the right things, displaying the right behavior, or, kind of apologetic behavior or maturity or whatever it was they were hoping, for his actions in this past year. I mean, his behavior in 2024, I think everybody can agree, whether we're in favor of the trade or not, that his behavior definitely ratcheted up this past year and was worse than it had been in prior seasons. And I think that was pretty concerning to most fans. So while I was never really one who was all for the trade of Pickens, I said all along, and I was hoping we would be able to keep him and work something out with him. I said all along that if he wasn't there and if he wasn't showing, and taking some responsibility for his actions last year, then it makes sense to move along from him, let him go, and let him move on. So when Zach gets here, we'll talk a little bit more about there's Zach. Yay. Hey, Zach's here. We could talk a little bit now that you're here about George Pickens' salty ass tweet or post. So he put out on Instagram, they the cheapest organization, ain't no stacking year after year. They're going to let them N-words go too soon as it's time, LMAO, and the crying face emoji. And so we're going to talk a little bit after we're done with this part of the show about the Steelers being a cheap organization, and you guys are going to want to hear this. Zach did a deep dive on researched about cheap organizations and organizations that spend tons of money and just how successful those organizations are. But I'm kind of curious, Zach, just to hear what you think about this comment from Pickens. Do you feel like that's a fair statement, or do you think that this is like sour grapes because he's mad?
I think you nailed it. It could be both. I think there is a modicum of truth in it that we'll go deeper into later. But this is George Pickens being George Pickens. And if it wasn't George Pickens enough to make the comment, it was George Pickens to double down and say, wasn't me, it was AI. I mean, I don't know what you're saying, George. What do you mean it was AI? I don't understand.
Now apparently, robots just tweet for him. So maybe that'll be Antonio Brown's next excuse. It's not him. It's just AI.
Exactly. I mean, the George Pickens PR train must be trying to keep up with Russell Wilson, because ever since he's gone, it's been like, no, he doesn't want a long-term contract. He's fine playing this out. He's fine. He doesn't want the money. I'm like, okay, wait until he catches 3 balls and CD catches 8.
Right. And it really makes no sense. You and I talked about this over text a little bit. I mean, and like I said, we'll go into a deep dive about the team being cheap, but in relation to George Pickens, that post that he made on Instagram makes me feel like he's trying to say, he wanted out of Pittsburgh. Like they weren't willing to negotiate with him and they weren't willing to pay him, but they did just pay DK. They have the most expensive defense in the NFL. Like the team puts money out there. And I just don't think anybody thought that they were going to pay 2 wide receivers, what they're paying DK Metcalf. I mean, you look at the Bengals, they've done that and they're hamstrung. I mean, what are they going to do with Hendrickson, who now wants to get paid and there's no money to pay him?
Exactly. That's an excellent point, because I want to say, no, George, we will pay. We just didn't want to pay you.
Right.
So, I mean, that's a painful thing. Sorry. And as a Steeler organization, we've done this before. If you're a young Steeler fan, I get that this is kind of new, but the Antonio Brown, Emmanuel Sanders, Mike Wallace situation, all of that, like, money that Mike Wallace wanted went to Antonio Brown.
Yeah.
And Mike Wallace left and went to the Dolphins and didn't do much.
Yeah.
So this is a pure case of that again. And I forget who it was. I was hearing just a passing thing. I was listening that someone said that under no circumstance should you take a receiver Mike Tomlin is done with. And I think those are wise words.
I think that there's some truth to that. I mean, if you look historically at those guys, they don't go other places and ball out for other teams, right? I saw somebody bring up on Twitter the other day that, like, well, you know, how bad the Steelers screwed up with Le'Veon Bell. You know, they could have paid him. And the reality is it must be somebody who wasn't paying attention at that time, because when Le'Veon left the Steelers, he'd asked for this outrageous amount of money. He's even admitted since then it was bad advice from his agent that he should have taken the amount that they offered him. He wound up going to the other team and playing for less than what he was going to make, what the Steelers had offered him. And he never returned to like Le'Veon Bell shape. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's interesting. And like I said, we'll talk a little bit more about them being cheap, but I was curious too what you thought about the rumors that the players might have been done with Pickens and they were hoping to see him move along. That didn't surprise me in the slightest, especially when I heard he was like late to things. And
yeah, it didn't surprise me either. What did surprise me is I was listening to Capoli and Mac the other day, and Mark Capoli, if he wants to make sure that he's just saying something to say something, he'll give himself a disclaimer. Did not do that with Pickens. He was like, they were fed up. He was like, and it's big guys in the locker room that were fed up. They were fed up that they had to talk for him. They were fed up about him being late. They were fed the amount of things that they were fed up with. It's so, and that a lot of people are not all that broken up. I think that was his exact wording, not all that broken up about Pickens being gone. So he can be as salty as he wants, but everyone in Pittsburgh is kind of taking a deep breath going, oh, okay. Air's a little better to breathe right now.
It's got to feel like that. We've all worked with that like toxic coworker and they finally leave or something, or you go somewhere else. I know I've certainly been there. And then you think like, why didn't I do this sooner? You know, or why didn't, you know, I wish they'd done this sooner. Todd brings up that he thinks if Roger does sign with the Steelers, week 1 against the Jets would be sweet facing off against Fields. That would be an exciting game. I think the NFL purposefully set some of these things up and, you know, for ratings, and who can blame them. And that would certainly be a good one.
That would be. There's a lot of really exciting games coming up. Yeah. But yeah, I guess we're looking for the silver linings of the if Rodgers signs. Although people are grasping at straws for Rodgers to get here.
Yeah, truly. One more little, you know, cup of tea before we move on to some other stuff. I love this from Juan Thornhill, who tweeted out, "Can't wait. This shit is personal. Come on, man. You got to feel like these are some shots fired at the Browns, right? You got to feel like that. What else could it be?" I love that. I love it when these guys come in here from AFC North teams and they've got a chip on their shoulder, you know, like Patrick Queen did. I love it when these guys come here and they're ready to go for the Steelers. I think that that's awesome. So I was very excited to see him tweet that out.
I really do. And doesn't it seem like people are more pumped when they get to the Steelers from another AFC North team than if they go to an AFC North team from the Steelers? Because I didn't hear Deontay Johnson going off when he went to the Ravens. I didn't hear Kenny Pickett when he went to the Browns. No one's going. But Patrick Queen gets here, he goes off. Juan Thornhill gets there, he goes. This is fun. I like this part of it.
Yeah, I do too. I thought it was fun. All right, we are going to start a new segment every week. If you live in Pittsburgh, if you have Pittsburgh family, then you know we all have that like drunk uncle, right? He's the one who gives like the outrageous takes. He's stuck like living in the past, you know, all of those things. We've all got that drunk Yinzer uncle. So our new segment is going to be called Tweeting Like a Drunk Yinzer Uncle. And every week we are going to find a fantastic drunk Yinzer uncle text to share with you guys. And this week's comes courtesy of Bobby Axelrod, who said, in response to all the talk about the Steelers being cheap. They are extremely cheap, famous for not paying players, and also have one of the poorest owners in the league. He's so cheap, us, the Steelers, purposely losing, so we don't host a home playoff game. It's highly likely. Rooney is known for asking the league every year for, I'm assuming, no home games or no home playoff games. I don't know where Bobby's been all these years. I know I've been to lots of home playoff games in Pittsburgh. I mean, teams make money and players make money if they make it to the playoffs. So to me, that seems like counterintuitive. Like you almost want to make it to the playoffs because your organization makes more money. It's not just that you have to pay your players more money.
Exactly, and that's backwards. And does he also not know how to schedule this? You don't get to just ask to not have as many home games. It's like every year Rooney's like, come on, bend the rules this time. One less home game. It's so ridiculous that you don't want to respond, but then you get so angry looking at you like, well, I just have to respond to everything in this.
I know.
So what a perfect drunk uncle thing. Just like if a drunk uncle said it, you're like, yeah, I'm not gonna fully touch that.
I got nothing to say. This is too ridiculous. I can't even talk about this. It's too ridiculous. It really is. All right, so let's talk a little bit about George Pickens and what we think this means for the Steelers. And Todd just asked us, do we think we're going to acquire another wide receiver since Pickens is gone? And I'm curious what you think. Do you think we'll be looking to pick somebody else up? I thought it was interesting that Omar Khan said, we're comfortable with our wide receiver room. And immediately I was like, oh my God, you said that last year. And then he goes, I know we said that last year, but this year is different. It was like he could hear me at home. So he feels comfortable in this group. And I'll admit, we're going to talk about this a little bit later, last year's roster to the potential 2025 roster and where we see areas of improvement. But what do you think they'll do with this wide receiver room?
I'm going to have an unpopular stance here that it's not as much I feel comfortable with the wide receiver room, but if we don't get someone, then that just means that either the asking price or all that was too high considering what they're aiming to build. Because I've said it many times before, I've been so happy about the foundation building. And if you are building a foundation this year, you already spent $150 million on a wide receiver, and you balled out on defense, and you have Mason Rudolph and possibly Aaron Rodgers, you kind of leave it. Like you don't mess with what's not broken, and that's what I see now. A lot of people see us as a we're going to win now team, and that's where that issue comes from. We're not a we're going to win now team. If we make a playoff game, that would be overachieving for this roster right now, and I think a lot of us agree. But if you're not wanting to see that, then you are curious and angry why we're not going to go get a wide receiver because we're one wide receiver from a Super Bowl. So there, I have some issue with certain views taken there.
Yeah, I got to agree with you on that. I guess part of my question is, and if you're watching, I'm curious to hear who you think the Steelers could go after, like within reason, who's out there that you think the Steelers could even pick up that would make a difference? Because I think we saw that last year in picking up some of those straggler guys, like, towards the end of the offseason. They weren't really difference makers. It was literally like putting warm bodies out in the field. And so I don't see the point. I mean, understandably, you have to have depth, right? So you have to have those depth pieces, but I'm not going to get excited about finding another Van Jefferson, that's just going to be another warm body to fill out a roster spot. So who's even out there as part of it? I mean, I'm struggling to come up with difference makers, even people close to George Pickens. You know what I mean? Let's not even say like George Pickens level totally, but close to George Pickens, that's a true wide receiver too. I feel like the Steelers must think that Roman Wilson is really ready to take that step forward. Whatever they've seen from him in the offseason, his recovery, whatever they were seeing from him, maybe whatever he was doing wrong last year, he's doubled down on the studying or something, and they feel like he's ready for this year. Or maybe they feel like Calvin Austin's going to take a big step forward. I find that hard to believe, but yeah, I'm just not sure who's even out there for us to take in. Now, to be honest, I'd like to have somebody, because I do think that, in the effort to win as many games as possible, which is always your team's goal, somebody like Mason would benefit from having another weapon out there, because are we going to be in the same situation we were in last year where George Pickens, now DK Metcalf, get shut down all the time by opposing defenses and there's no one else of any substance to throw the ball to?
That's true. I think I look at it as a whole, because on defense, I think you have to agree. Just generally, we're a better defense now than we were last year.
Yes.
We feel we're a better defense now. So the removal of George Pickens doesn't bother me too much because of the addition of Metcalf. So let's just say the offense evens out. If we only really need like an extra touchdown a game from the offense to change a lot of those losses last year into wins. So I don't feel like a lot has to be tinkered with, and there's a comfortability the team has when they looked and like, guys, we know where we're going to invest in. We already made a big investment there. We're looking down the line, and a wide receiver 2 big investment is not on the books this year. So everyone, the company line, you're comfortable with the wide receiver room. And that's how that meeting went, and that's all you're going to get from them from this point on. So, and Mike Tomlin's happy with how irritated people are that they're saying that again.
But you almost have to say it. I've said this before when fans complain about, Tomlin not coming out and bitching about his team on at press conferences. Like, what kind of coach would he be if he came out and he was like, yeah, these guys are pretty mediocre and I really don't know that they can do it. And shit, TJ Watt might as well just stay home this year because there's no point in playing these. You know what I mean? Like, you can't be that way. As a coach, your job is to lift these guys up and to believe in your guys. You got to believe in them if you want them to believe in themselves. So.
Exactly. I mean, what was the coaching soundbite? What do you think of the execution of your team? Oh, I'm all for it. It makes a fun soundbite. That's amusing. It's fun. But then that coach has to go into the locker room and look at his players in the face, and he just said things about them. So
yeah,
there's a point people have to remember. He has to, like, mini camps have started. He's around players now, so he's not going to go out saying, man, this wide receiver room, huh? Phew, other than Metcalf, man, that's rough out there, huh?
right.
Goodness, Calvin Austin, boy, that guy's small. He's not going to go out and things like
right.
that.
Right.
So this is what you're getting. So everyone's welcome to their opinions, but if you think Mike Tomlin's changing.
Right. John agrees with you. He said, folks need to be realistic and think 2027. That is with luck finding the quarterback who doesn't need much development. The team can't admit that this season has no chance for a Super Bowl. It's bad for sales. I mean, I agree with John, but I don't think any team can admit that they're not going to have a chance for a Super Bowl. I mean, you don't even hear like the Carolina Panthers saying like, oh, this isn't going to be our year, or somebody else. I mean, you've had teams like their quarterback goes down and they're still like, I think so-and-so can do it. So I don't think any team's going to ever admit that they can't do it. They're all hoping for things to go their way and some luck and guys to rise to the occasion. I mean, Mike Tomlin brings it up all the time that these guys are all professionals, so even when you're looking at the depth pieces, they're still among the best of the best, as far as football players go in this country. And so you expect them to rise to the occasion. So while I agree with John, I don't know that any team is ever going to admit that.
Exactly. I know you go to any team's opening day meeting, and I guarantee somewhere in that some way the coach is going to say, okay, guys, the goal. It's to make the playoffs, win your division, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. It's the same thing. Every coach has it to every player in some way. So, yes, that's their goal. I guarantee a bunch of those coaches are saying that. They'll look around and like, oh, goodness, we're not going to make it playoffs this year. So,
right.
And that it's a whole other mini series of episodes we could do on the expectations of coaching and the lack of ability to progress the team. But I'm going to sound like an old man on a porch if I say that.
Right.
And yes,
John said, number one drafted quarterbacks have a 50-50 chance to be great. Allen, Burrows, and Jackson are considered great with no ring. And I agree with that. I mean, I've talked about this before. You and I have talked about the luck factor that goes into this. You know what I mean? You can look at somebody and think that they're, in college or performing so highly. And then, for whatever reason, it just doesn't translate to the pros and they don't excel. I mean, I guess Tim Tebow is always like the top of the list for guys that you think of automatically when you think about players who didn't perform as well as they were expected to.
Tim Tebow, when I look at that whole story, a lot of people are like, wow, that's just I can't believe it happened the way it did. I'm like, it kind of was like watching someone stand on the side of the ocean, a tidal wave's coming, you're like, the tidal wave's coming, and they just don't move. Tim Tebow's throwing arm motion was so bad, it never changed. You're like, nothing has changed in the pros. So yeah, but I think it's important to know with the Josh Allen comment. I don't know if people remember Josh Allen's first year, most of his second year, dude was awful. He
Yeah.
was really inaccurate. A lot of people were saying bust a lot. So yeah, that he was given the ability and time to get there. So
And I
Will
think all
Howard,
of
wink,
these
wink.
guys, but there's grace that comes with that, right? You throw Bryce Young, Trevor Lawrence, you throw these guys right to the wolves, you know what I mean? And I feel like that 50-50 chance John is talking about drops even more, when they don't have any time to develop. I mean, Josh Allen was lucky to have some time to grow. Tom Brady had that time to grow. So I think that the guys that jump in, Jaden Daniels types who start their rookie season and really excel and outperform expectations are few and far between. So I mentioned earlier that Zach did kind of a deep dive into the finances of cheap teams and what that translates to in the NFL. So I'm going to let Zach take over this because math is not Leanne's thing. We've got a couple little slides, and I'm going to let Zach handle this one. Zach, it's all yours.
Okay, so when I saw George Pickens call people cheap, the Steelers cheap, I knew the very first thing that was going to happen was everybody on Steeler Twitter was going to say, I agree, the Steelers are cheap. The Steelers, they never pay their players and all that. So I really wanted to see, number one, was it true the Steelers were incredibly cheap? And number two, does actually spending a ridiculous amount on your players translate to winning? Can you buy your way to winning like the Rams do? And I thought I was gonna maybe find something. Everything I found was interesting. So if I were to divide it up between, I think it was 94 to 2011. The truth was, yeah, if you paid, then you normally won. I think it was the teams averaged the 10th highest in spending that won a Super Bowl, including the Steelers in 2005 and 2008. We were the 7th highest in spending. That is not the truth anymore. The truth of the modern NFL is from 2012 to now, the team that won the Super Bowl averaged the 20th highest in cash spending. And this is where George Pickens, I'm going to give him the modicum of truth. Steelers are near the bottom of the league when it comes to spending. We are consistently down there. But the problem is, so were the Chiefs the year they won. So were a lot of other teams. Most of the teams that won the Super Bowl from 2012 to now were in the bottom 10 teams of the league. So it's not a problem of spending. The Steelers spend where they feel they should. And I don't know, Leanne, maybe this isn't just me. I feel that's always been the case. And I was raised as a Steeler fan to know you earned your contracts in Pittsburgh. Dallas gives them out. Other places give them out. You earn your way. When Troy Polamalu got his big ones, when Ben Roethlisberger became a member of the $100 million club, I felt something different, and because of these guys earned it more than anybody else did, and so we're not. It's not the spending part. It's the part that me and Lana said. A lot of other podcasts have said we're just not a great team building franchise right now. That's an unfortunate reality. So I wouldn't want us to go out and be like all the other franchises and spend like they're going to. Because here's a nice little example of what I'm talking about. This is since 2011. The Steelers are actually we spend quite a bit. So despite the a lot of people are only looking at the last 3 or 4 years. And granted, I think we were 30th one time, 20th another time, 27th another time, but sixth since 2011. That doesn't that yeah. So I'm frustrated when people generalize and say that the Steelers are cheap. The Steelers are cheap. A lot of teams right now that win the Super Bowl are cheap. They just know where to spend and how to build that team. So let's all calm down. Let's not call the Steelers cheap anymore, and let's ask for them to start progressing players better. Let's ask for, like Omar Khan has been doing. Let's get back to drafting like we're supposed to. All of that. So when TJ Watt gets his extension, and he's going to get an extension, that is where that money is supposed to go. It was not supposed to go to George Pickens. And people will, in 3 or 4 years, be really, really happy that if you didn't post it, that Steelers are cheap. you're going to be really happy you didn't, because that's going to be on our drunk uncle take. We're going to remember all the people in 3 years.
It's funny. I always think this, and look, I openly admit, like, math is not my thing, right? So I'm sure there's people that understand all of the salary stuff far better than I do. But here's my thing. In baseball, you can buy the best team in the league. You can do it. You can spend all the money and you can buy all the best players and still not win championships, right? The Yankees have done it. Other teams have done it where they spend a ton of money and it doesn't get them a championship, doesn't get them a World Series. In football, every team has the same cap hit, right? Cap amount, right? Their salary cap is the same. So the only difference among all the teams is how you choose to distribute that money. You could be the Bengals and give the majority of it to 3 players on offense, or you could be like the Steelers and some other teams and spread that money around. The Bills do it well. There's some other teams that do it well that spread that money around. And so I feel like it's hard to say that like we're cheap and we don't spend on players, because to me it appears that we do a better job not just getting like 3 or 4 players that you give all your money to, right? And then everybody else is like a low level depth piece because you can't afford anybody else. Like we try to get guys that right there, some big stars at key positions, and then guys that are, solid players at the other one, so that it kind of balances out, if that makes sense. And Big Poppy says that typically bad teams go big in free agency and overspend. See Washington in the old regime. And I swear I was going to bring this up before he posted it, because I talk about Washington all the time because I used to live there and used to watch them, seeing them spend like absurd amount of money on these players who were once good. I always say they buy old Steelers who are washed up, but who were once good somewhere else, and then go to Washington and are terrible or has-beens, and they've paid them all this money, and it didn't buy them a win. It didn't buy them a win for 40 years. John says the Rooneys are second from the bottom in NFL wealth. Stan Kroenke is the richest. He can afford lawyers and make workarounds to avoid the cap and build mega complexes, not an even playing field. And that I agree with. If there's some ways that you can work around things, I think all teams can work around the salary cap to some degree. And this money doesn't necessarily come right out of the Rooney's pockets, right? It comes out of the team. But I agree with John that if your owner has some extra money to spend on other things, then that does work, and obviously in their favor. I don't know. I don't buy into the fact that having like the nicest practice facility or massage therapist for every player or whatever is the thing that's going to, that's the extra stuff your team could spend money on, not your salary. And I don't feel like that's the stuff that's going to necessarily win you a championship.
I absolutely agree. And I think everybody needs to be very, very honest about something. When DK Metcalf signed with us, I guarantee it was shocking. A lot of people wondered, what did he see in Pittsburgh that made him want to sign with us? So that's an outlier, but that's the reality. So because I guarantee there were players out there that the Steelers could have thrown money at and would have come here and they would have been subpar players, because all the DK Metcalf level players did not want to come to Pittsburgh. A lot of people want to go where they're able to right off the bat be competitive, or where they are maybe the Aaron Rodgers situation and the up in the air with it, and the Mason Rodgers. I'm amazed it didn't scare DK Metcalf up, but there's a reality about who the Steelers are right now and why those players aren't as attracted to Pittsburgh as they may have been.
See, I disagree with that. I still think that the Steelers, I still think that the history of the team, I believe that while many fans may not like Mike Tomlin, I do not think that that's the case in the league. I think among players, I think among his colleagues, I think he's incredibly highly respected. Just because fans don't like him, or just because fans think I wouldn't play for Pittsburgh, like, newsflash, Wayne, nobody's asking you to come play for the Steelers, right? That's not happening, right? So you're not being afforded that option to say what you would or wouldn't do if you were DK Metcalf. So I think that there is still some weight that goes behind playing for the Steelers. And even if the Steelers aren't the level they were in 2008 or the Killer Bee era or whatever, I do think that that carries some weight. And you look at players, you have players flock out to San Francisco, right, when they made it to the Super Bowl that year, and they haven't sniffed it since, so those things happen. Look at the amount of time between the Eagles' 2 recent Super Bowls. So unless you're talking about the Kansas City Chiefs, who seem to go almost every year, every other year, there just aren't that many teams that feel like a slam dunk. And so you are taking like a calculated risk. I do think players want to find success, but I also think, what your job feels like to you and what that is for you carries some weight too. Like most people don't want to go somewhere where they aren't going to be respected or treated well or listened to or have their coaches care about them. And I think all of those things are the things that the Steelers excel with. And that workplace environment is something that means a lot to a lot of people. And you hear that from the players. They want to be there. I mean, TJ Watt could leave. He could have demanded a trade. He could have gone somewhere. Cam Hayward could have left. They haven't done that. Ben Roethlisberger could have left. He didn't try to leave. And he was about as curmudgeonly as they come. And he wasn't trying to leave. So I do feel like that, wow, fans are very frustrated, and that's how they take it out on the team and social media. I don't think the players feel that way. I don't think they have to come out and defend anybody, right? Does Cam Hayward have to get on his podcast and say anything? He certainly doesn't. Lots of players don't really talk about that stuff on their shows, but he does, and he talks about, wanting to be there and how much all of that means to him.
That's a good point. I mean, you hear how Will Howard just talks about it, and he hasn't even played a single game, and the dude is just he cannot stop talking. And he's out of Pirates games, and he's out of all the so. It's a volunteers, not hostages thing. So that's a good point, and it takes players like that to get the standard back to where we're talking about the 2005 2008. So in the Cam Hayward, I think maybe that's why he's that excited about Derek Harmon, because it's not just a player he sees, but it's someone who, when he's gone, that fire can continue on. That's a good point. I like that.
It's got to feel good because like we talked about this before, like that is that Steeler way, right? Like the current guys building up the younger guys and getting them ready. And then they come back and they see that next generation. And you see those guys, the old Steelers, Brett Kiesel and James Harrison, and even back before all of that come back, and this stuff really means something to them. And I feel like we've really seen that on our defense consistently since the Steel Curtain era. And we were seeing it on our offense, but it's really dropped off, over the past 10 years, maybe 8 years, as it got toward the end of Ben's career. And then definitely since then, with no continuity, it's hard to continue that message and, that hand on the batons of tradition to people when there's no one there that understands what that baton was. So I think we talked about this last show, this new regime and who are going to be those guys on offense that start to build that back up again, looking at Zach Frazier and some of these other young guys who may be those guys that start to bring those traditions back to Pittsburgh's offense.
That is a great point, because a lot of the writers that I talked about just at mini camp, where it's hard to really glean a lot from it, but they said that the grit and the style of player that the Steelers went out to get this season, and even the UFAs that they brought in, there's a specific type of player that they're aiming to get back to, and that's a Steeler type of player, and I like that. That's a very good point.
All right, so I've got this tweet I saved from Mark Caballi, and I'm really curious if you're watching the show, what you think about this. I'm going to read it because if you're listening, it's easier that way. He talked about the Steelers' offense in 2024 versus the Steelers' offense in 2025. And of course, this is a little bit theoretical or hypothetical or whatever you want to call it because the roster isn't finalized yet. But quarterback Russell Wilson versus Aaron Rodgers. Running back Najee Harris versus Jaylen Warren. Running back 2, Jaylen Warren versus Caleb Johnson. Running back 3, Cordarrelle Patterson versus Kenneth Gainwell. Then in wide receivers, you've got George Pickens versus DK Metcalf. Van Jefferson to Calvin Austin. Calvin Austin to Roman Wilson. Mike Williams to Robert Woods. And then for our tight ends, you've got Pat Freiermuth to Pat Freiermuth, and Darnell Washington obviously stays the same as well. Then for left tackle, you've got Dan Moore switching to Broderick Jones. Guard, Sayamalu staying the same. Center, Zach Frazier staying the same. Right guard, McCormick staying the same. And then right tackle, Broderick Jones shifting from Troy Faltanu. And I thought this was really interesting, this press that this is a substantially better offense, regardless of what people seem to think. And looking at it like this in black and white made me really go, he might have a point here. Now, I understand that, we're still like on the 50-50 fence with Rodgers. So that could be Mason Rudolph. But I'm curious what you think. Where do you see improvement, or what do you think? Do you think he's on the mark here? Do you think he's missed the mark entirely?
The Mark Caboli's absolute confidence that Aaron Rodgers might as well already have a Steelers uniform, that confuses and irritates me at the same time. But for the purpose of this particular tweet, we'll just run with it. What I'm gonna, I don't want to say predict, but my guess is you got to switch that RB1 and RB2. Everything I've heard about Caleb Johnson is this guy is better than what people thought. Just from what they've seen, and the burst is better.
I'll play Jaylen Warren this year.
Yeah, I think it's going to be Caleb Johnson, Jaylen Warren is going to end up again becoming a spell back, which I will repeat it again. Jaylen Warren is best as a RB2. He is great in pass protection. He is great in short bursts, but you make him run a marathon, you're going to have an issue. And any team that doesn't have Cordell Patterson on is going to be better. So that's automatically
5 points or something, right? Like automatic boost.
Exactly. And I know we're all hoping across the offensive line that we're just getting better, but it's hard not to feel confident when the weak links are gone. Troy Fautanu, I really hope he's back because a lot of positive things were said about him. So yeah, I can see how he says it's a better team. So I even without George Pickens, I don't mind that. I'm excited to see what Calvin Austin and Roman Wilson can do. And I hope they're excited about it because there's a lot of hate outside that locker room for this wide receiver group for the second year in a row. So let's use that again, guys.
Yeah, I mean, use it to fire you. I thought some of those guys, given a lot of the malfunctions that were going on in the offensive line last year, I think, people put a lot of hate towards the wide receivers. But I think a big part of the issue was quarterbacks, and the inconsistency with quarterbacks, and then also the inconsistency with offensive line. I don't think you can underestimate how big of an impact all of those injuries and the constant change has to have on those players. Do you know what I mean? The offensive players. I feel like that just had to have a huge impact. So to me, I think if we could really come out with this group out of the gates, and this group could get their feet under them and stay healthy, I think this has the potential to be a really good offensive line. I think people forget that, other than Dan Moore, really, because we thought Dan Moore wasn't going to start, this was almost the offensive line last year, other than Mason McCormick. This is who we thought we were going to have last year. And it, it didn't pan out because of the injuries. So we all believed in Troy Faltanu last year headed into the season. And I've heard all these people talk about how injury prone he is, and he's really not. I mean, he had this injury and it was a fluke. It could have happened to anybody. And, his prior 2 years while he was in college, he wasn't injured. He wasn't wearing knee braces. He wasn't missing games. So I do feel like this has some real potential here. I think the big linchpin is really going to be quarterback, and not just Aaron Rodgers versus Mason Rudolph, but how well either of those two play. And is it Mason Rudolph that was the Christmas miracle Mason Rudolph, or is it Mason Rudolph against the Buffalo Bills Mason Rudolph? And which, I know we're not getting Aaron Rodgers from 2008 or something, but what Aaron Rodgers are we getting? How good is he going to be? Because he was a little bit up and down last season too. But I look at this wide receiver room, and I think DK Metcalf is superior to George Pickens. And I think when you come with so much less drama like he does, I think that automatically makes you better, because your teammates are going to want to get you the ball. The guys are going to want to support you. You're going to feel like you're supporting them. And I think if we could just have that positive attitude on our offense, it would make such a huge difference. I really felt like it was where the team fell apart at the end of last season, with all the negativity. And so, yeah, I'm excited about it.
That's true. And what the 5 year contract for DK Metcalf, a lot of people are, and I agree, are saying that's really important because George Pickens, if he would have kept it, would have been 1 year, and the lack of possibly having a quarterback would have been really, really bad. Metcalf understands that what he signed up for. He understands that maybe he's got a year or two of uncertainty, but if we draft a quarterback next year, then he gets to come in with a really good rookie quarterback. So I think that's exciting. But the most important thing for the Steelers to do, no matter who your quarterback is do not do any of this. Oh, it's a competition thing. If Aaron Rodgers is not signed, it is Mason Rudolph starting, Will Howard, and then whoever is third. If Aaron Rodgers comes in, everybody just back up one step. It is Aaron Rodgers, Mason Rudolph, Will Howard, and that's it. No competition. You know where the snaps are going, and so all of that. That's the most important thing. We don't want to hear another fake quarterback competition where we all know how it's going to end.
I think that's a really good point because while I really like Will Howard and I've got my fingers and my toes crossed that he can be the future of this organization, I don't want to shoot him in the foot coming out of the gates by putting some excessive amount of pressure, on this young player. Like, I feel like he's so positive. He's got such a great attitude. He's not cocky. He's not arrogant. He's just confident in all the right ways. And I really love that about him. So I think he's got the potential, to possibly do something. Do you know what I mean? I'm not the sure thing like some other Steelers fans are. I've said it before. I think at worst case he could be a better Mason Rudolph. A really good backup quarterback. But I think that for his sake he needs time to develop, and we can't be, all this waffling back and forth. Relic is here, and he said he's recovering from oral surgery this morning. Oh no! I hope you're feeling okay. I'm thinking about you. That's no fun.
Goodness.
Oral surgery's terrible.
No. Dentist stuff is the worst in the world, so I appreciate that you're up at all, let alone just using to spend time with us. But that's a great point, and I think that's. I don't want to get into a Shooter Sanders cover, but at the comparison, I think Will Howard understands what his draft position means. Shooter Sanders is going into this saying, I'm going to outperform my draft position. And Will Howard's like, no, I know where I got drafted. They drafted me at that position and at that spot for a reason. I'm here to learn. I like that. I'm not even going to call it humility. I'll call it reality. He understands the situation.
And look, don't get me wrong. If Will Howard's mind, he's thinking, I'm going to bust my ass and I'm going to be better than everybody and all of that. Yes, 100%. That's what I want you to do. But I want you to show that and not just be on podcasts and talk shows, with your dad telling everybody how you're going to be so much better than everybody. I want you to go out there and just do that. You don't need to say it if you're doing it, right? So
exactly. And what I'm hoping from Pickens being gone, and hopefully with Aaron Rodgers not being here, but whatever way you're going, that there's going to be reality in this locker room for the whole season. Guys, everyone can say Super Bowl or bust. We understand where we are. We understand where we want to get to. And maybe our goals on our whiteboard look a little different this year than they have in the past. But we will get back to saying Super Bowl or bust.
Yeah.
I want that because that's important. And George Pickens would not have liked that. He would have kicked back at that like a mule.
Yeah, I don't know. Look, if they have to say, our goal is a Super Bowl because that's your goal every year, like, I get it, right? Like, I'm not hating on that. I do think you should, it's like shooting for the stars. I do think you should do that. So I'm hoping that they are going in with this mindset that they can be successful. But I also hope that they're going into the, like you said, with this mindset about realism. Do you know what I mean? Relic says he doesn't know exactly what all we've talked about beyond the Pickens stuff, but it does seem like Rodgers is just going to retire and screw the Steelers over. I feel it's going to happen. Relic, we hadn't talked about this yet, other than to talk about Rodgers in kind of an adjacent way and how he didn't really join the country club. But I have to say that I kind of agree with you. I feel like the longer this drags on, I know I saw some tweet today about, him not signing anytime soon still. And that just makes me feel like it's not going to happen. Zach, is your Aaron Rodgers meter? I know you're not worried one way or the other because you're prepared for Mason, but has your Rodgers meter gone up, down, or stayed the same?
I want to just shrug it off completely, but Mark Caboli is under my damn skin here because someone who was that close to the Steelers, who was around the Steelers that much, has this connect, is so incredibly fucking confident that Aaron Rodgers is going to sign. He actually he said before training camp he's going to sign. He said it like 5 times on multiple shows. He said it. But the only part of with the relics thing I'll disagree with. I don't know if Aaron Rodgers retiring would screw the Steelers over. I think maybe if at the very beginning, when we all thought it was going to happen overnight, he's like, I'm going to retire now. I think the Steelers, whether you like the plan or not, have a quarterback plan. And they went into this and they were like, we're not going to overpay for a quarterback. We're not going to pay for Kirk Cousins. Look at what happened with the Falcons. Aaron wants to come. Great. If not, look who we got. We got Mason. And that was because Mason was a big surprise to me, almost bigger than DK Metcalf.
I was surprised Mason wanted to come back to Pittsburgh. Relic said last he saw was Ian Rappaport saying the Steelers are, quote, okay with waiting as long as it leads to Rodgers signing. So I feel this is going to backfire big time on us. And, oh, God, I hate this. Like every day that he's not signed, it makes me want him even less. It's so frustrating. I feel like he's trolling us a little bit. I don't like it. My mind tells me that like the Steelers don't give a shit. Do you know what I mean? Like you said, like legitimately, like we've got Mason, we don't need you. So I do feel like they're there. And I agree with you that I don't know how much it screws us. But then this other part of my brain is like, are we waiting on things because of him? Like waiting on TJ's extension. I know they won't do that till this summer regardless. Like I know it's too early for that. But another wide receiver, is there some other position that they feel they need, you know what I mean? I don't know, a cornerback or somebody, right? And they're not sure, what money they've got to spend because they don't know what's happening with Rodgers. That's the only thing that kind of keeps making me go like, and then I tell myself, like, if there was somebody out there that they really wanted, they would just go get him and it would be too bad for Rodgers.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
But this I agree with. Relic said, let's be real. Rodgers needs as much time as possible to get in groove with our wide receiver core. OTAs needs to be the deadline, Rodgers wants a certain type of offense, so he needs to hurry the fuck up. And see, that's part of it for me. Like, this is a new team for him, so I don't care how good Rodgers is and how he can roll right in, off the back of the trailer on day one of training camp and just be ready to go. I don't think the same is necessarily true for the offensive line, for the wide receivers, for the running backs, for the tight ends, for the coaching staff. How does the offensive team build a game plan and develop, plays and all of these things when they don't really even know who they're doing that for? I just feel like it throws such a wrench in things. It makes me hope that the Steelers already know what the answer to this is and are confident in that answer, whether it's yes or no. So, if they feel that he's not coming and Rodgers is leading them on, they're fine with just letting him say whatever he wants to say. And they've already moved on planning without him. Or for some reason, they feel very confident he is coming and that's going to happen soon enough for them that it makes sense. I don't know. I don't like it though. I don't like waiting.
Yeah. And whether you like Rodgers, I don't give a fuck attitude.
Right.
It matters to a lot of these players. There's a respect about being there in the dog days of it all and being there while it's growing and being there in the hotel rooms and without air conditioning. Not that Aaron Rodgers would actually allow himself to do that. He'd probably have a dark cave or something.
Right.
But it matters. And that affects team building because if and this is a big if, and it goes against everything I believe the Steeler team is going to be. If the Steeler team does accomplish anything like a playoff win and all that, it's going to be because everyone came together. Everyone was on the same page from the very, very start to the very, very end. And that's not going to happen if Rodgers just chooses not to show up.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Relic goes on to say that if Mason is the key right now and it is starting, Mike T better not pull his vet shit. I read it. I thought it said wet shit. And I was like, why is he going to take a wet shit? That's gross. And start Rodgers if he signs right before preseason. Let Mason do his thing if this goes on too long. Look, if he gets to the point where he tells Mason, you're our starting quarterback. Because look, Mason came here and he said he knows he came here to be a backup, right? That's when he was signed to Pittsburgh this second time, he came as a backup quarterback and he knew that. So if he gets to the point where he says to him, Mason, the plan's changed and now you are our starter, I agree. He cannot take that back and go, oh, now you got to sit in the bench because Rodgers is coming. You can't let somebody manhandle your organization like this. John thinks the Steelers could be the one to stop the waiting game before Rodgers decides. I do think there's a possibility of that. I think if they've got some date in their head that they feel like they need X amount of time for Rodgers and the deal's not done, I do think there's a chance they could, whether it gets publicly announced or it's a private thing, I do think that they would do that. I agree.
Exactly. And if Aaron Rodgers is going to be a distraction, for sure, I'd rather him being a distraction while at training camp than the distraction being why isn't Aaron Rodgers training camp. I would much more prefer that, because can you imagine every single day that he's not at any of those workouts? That's all Mike Tomlin's going to be asked about. And Mike Tomlin's going to get irritated and he's going to do another grumpy walk guy. It's going to be a whole thing. And we don't need that. We don't need that. Mike Tomlin's already grumpy enough during preseason and all this. We don't need him grumpier.
Right. Relic asked us how we feel about the wide receiver core, good, bad, and ugly. We talked about this before you joined the show because we brought up this tweet from Kabali about the comparing the team from last year to this year. And I think Zach and I, kind of agreed that it's not ideal, but it could be worse, and both of us are curious to see if they're going to find somebody else to bring in.
Yep. And one word for the wide receiver group is appropriate. That's legitimately for the 2025 Steelers. It is a little better than last year. Robert Woods is a little better than Van Jefferson, who was a little better than Allen Robinson. So we're getting a little better. Yeah,
maybe that's the way to look at it. John brings up that he sees the media looking for drama with Rodgers, either real or not, and him on the Pat McAfee show, going to public court, great for engagement, cash, but bad for the team. And see, that's part of why I wanted Rodgers to go ahead and just sign and get this over with, because I do think it's going to be a shit show in the media for a little while of them, all this debating about how he and Mike Tomlin are going to work together and how he's going to get along with so-and-so and what will Arthur Smith do. And, John said he has $400 million and his ego is bigger than his bank account. I think that's hard to deny.
It is. And I like that you said about the cash grab thing, John, because he knows every week he doesn't sign, that Tuesday or whatever day he's on McAfee, everyone's going to show up on the off chance that's the day he mentions it. And the longer he holds off, more people it's a whole thing.
If he announces
does he have merchandise he's trying to sell?
If he announces it on McAfee before the team gets a chance to announce it, then he truly is just nothing but like an attention-seeking whore. Relic thinks that if Roman doesn't work out, we're pretty much back to last year, but you would think there would have been something in the draft since Pickens' trade was looming. I think they had to know they were going to trade Pickens, and I just think that he's so screwy in the head that they weren't seeing the deal they wanted for him in the draft, and so they played a little chess and not checkers and waited and ended up getting a better deal from Dallas. And I'm hoping Relic's right. I said this earlier. I hope that they've seen something from Roman Wilson that makes them feel confident about this second year for him, that, they didn't feel they needed to go out and draft a wide receiver high in the draft. Between him and Calvin Austin, it's enough, because being right back where we were in 2024 is terrifying.
That's true. Oh, well, actually, here's a random and interesting question that I just thought of, Liam. Because of Roman Wilson's history and all that we've had, but we really want to see what there is. Do you want to see him play a lot in preseason just to see what he has, or not a lot in preseason on the off chance he might get hurt?
I think a lot, because, a decent amount, because if you're that fragile, then we've got big issues. Do you know what I mean? Anybody can get hurt, right? Like that can happen to anybody. Most of those injuries that occur are flukes. I don't think that they're necessarily usage based, like a pitcher's elbow or something. So I think I'd rather see him play, because we got to know if he doesn't have what it takes, then we've got to, under pressure, he can't handle it. We've got to find somebody else.
That's an excellent point. I like.
Yeah. John agrees. He said about Aaron, if he announced at the Pat McAfee show and not formally with the Steelers, that would be to his venue to engage the public all season. And I agree that I think he's coming here for all the wrong reasons. I think it would tell us what we need to know about him. I don't like the drama he brings, but if he's coming here for the right reasons and he sincerely feels like he can work with the team and be a part of something, then fine. It is what it is. But I don't know that he's capable of that anymore.
Exactly. The simple fact that he let someone from KDKA do the digging and find out that he didn't join the country club, rather than just came out like, no, I didn't join the country club.
Right.
I wasn't. I did. The fact that he just let it go on and was probably happy about it, that lets you know.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, Zach, any final thoughts wrapping up this week, put another week in the books?
We're another step closer. And if the NFL finds any way to drag out a schedule release, holy hell, this is exhausting. So I just announced it. Just be done with it. But it's exciting about Ireland. I'm really excited about the Steelers playing there. So
yeah. Next year when they announce the schedule, they're just going to start announcing it like one letter a day or something. Do you know what I mean? So it goes on for like 7 months. I mean, this could not take any longer. Like, just tell us what it is already. How do you release the international games for? I don't know. Whatever. It's a mess. It's exciting to see new Steelers pictures up on the website. I love that. I live for this stuff, seeing all the new players out there, seeing the guys out there. So that's good. It makes us feel like that the season is right around the corner, and I know I'm ready to see what we can do. Well, thank you very much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it. Relic, hope you're feeling better. Please do us a favor, like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You can follow us. Both of our X pages are listed below our names, as well as the Steel City Huddle page on X. You can also find us on Blue Sky. If you're watching this after the show's already been aired, please drop us a comment and let us know what you think about, Cavalli's tweet about the 2024 team versus the 2025 thing. And I'm also curious to hear what you all think about all of Zach's research on the cheapest teams and how you feel about that. I'm curious if it changed anybody's opinion or enlightened anybody who's something you didn't know before. Thank you all so much. Have a good night.
Leanne and Zach would like to thank you for tuning in to the Steel City Huddle podcast. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss a thing.